Presiding officer, I remember days as my early days as an MSP in this chamber, when events like this, speeches like this, and debates like this would effectively be big marquee events. The chamber would be full, the government benches would certainly be full, the public gallery would be full, and yes, the columnists and scribblers and broadcast journalists would be packing out the press gallery. Not even the hard-bitten columnists of The National are here today. Such is the level to which this issue has now been plunged into deep freeze, and I think evidence of the end to our rhetorical wars of independence. And I am glad of it, because there are better things we can be doing with our time in this chamber. Presiding officer, Winston Churchill once said that the definition of a fanatic is someone who can't change their mind and is unwilling to change the subject. And we will see in the tenor of the debate from the government and Green benches today the measure of the fanaticism in those parties. I wish they would change the subject, because there are so many topics crying out for this Parliament's attention and for parliamentary time. It's a rare thing. I wish the government would make time available for things like the crisis in accessing primary care and GP appointments at the first time of asking, the lack of dentists providing NHS care in our constituencies, the sewage flowing into our rivers from the government-owned water company, the mental health crisis which sees young people with suspected ADHD waiting in a waiting list for 7 years, the missed climate targets, the drug death emergencies, the 170,000 Scots currently battling long COVID. And presiding officer, you will remember that this is the government that made twice as much money available for a referendum on this topic that didn't happen as have done for the whole of the sufferers of long COVID in this country. It is a national outrage. This is how Liberal Democrats would choose to influence government time. And there's every sign and every indication, if we are going to be part of what's next, that we will have more influence, and I am glad of that. But the SNP have spent the last 10 years picking at the scab of their defeat. It colours everything we do in this place. There are warning lights blinking across the dashboard of public policy, crying out for ministerial attention, but they are wanting it. It explains why there are now 8 times as many Liberals on the Green benches of the House of Commons in Westminster as there are nationalists, and why we in this party came within touching distance of the number of Scottish MPs returned to Westminster. I came back from Brighton yesterday with a buoyant conference with 72 new Lib Dem MPs focused on the people's priorities, what we should be discussing in this place. And I go back to the general election, because that was an important line in the sand. I think for the first time in a while, the SNP were humbled. They could no longer defy the laws of political gravity. Far from being the de facto referendum that they had set out initially to make it, the people rendered their judgment. They were not interested in having that discussion. Yes, presiding officer, the polls, any given poll that you look at this week, last week, or any week for the last 10 years, show that the public we represent is largely evenly divided, or as divided as it was on the topic of independence as they were in 2014. But the salience has fallen away to almost nothing. Because if you ask people what motivates your vote, they will tell you it's about health. It's about the cost of living. It's about heating your home or your children's education, which has fallen under this government. They take far greater priority. It's a bit like saying, do you believe in God? Everyone's got a view about that, but it doesn't motivate how you vote, and nor too does the Constitution. And thank goodness that this 10-year anniversary will bookend a topic that has stifled our democracy, where every election up till this general election has been wrapped in a flag, based on a reductive calculation as the best way to have a referendum or the only means of stopping one. I am glad of it. We'll hear a lot about Brexit. We've already heard a lot about Brexit, but the SNP were latent converts to that cause, to the cause of European unity. And in fact, the SNP spent more losing the Shetland by-election to the Liberal Democrats than they did on the entirety of the Remain campaign in 2019. I'm going to make some progress. I'll come back to you later. But Remain voters will find
Let's hear Mr. Cole Hamilton.
And, presiding officer, we know from that recent history of that divisive referendum what happens when you offer people a proposition in the blind. That we were told the full sum total of the Brexit campaign on the back end of a bus. The white paper didn't have a great deal more to it. And actually, when that meets the reality, when that connects with real life, I'll take an intervention from Alistair Allen.
Alistair Allen.
The member for giving way. Can you just clarify, any time soon in government, are the Lib Dems planning to rejoin the European Union?
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Well, we're not actually in government right now, but we certainly have a clearer roadmap back towards European integration than the SNP do, and Remain voters know that, because the SNP know that trying to rejoin the independent or join the European Union as an independent country would take years and austerity on stilts. That wasn't my words, that was their own fiscal commission, their own economic growth commission pointed that out. But, presiding officer, when we have that reality, as we did with Brexit, there are sacrifices and there are barriers, and Remainers understand that too. I will conclude by saying this. For too long we have talked about this, while matters of great importance to the people in this country idle. Lib Dems believe in togetherness, in internationalism, in Scotland's place in a reformed, united and federal United Kingdom. I am glad that 10 years ago we voted to remain in this family of nations. Let this afternoon, we indulge this failing government in its obsession and in its fanaticism, be the very last one we do so in this chamber. Thank you.